All good things must come to an end. Alright, boys and girls. This is the spool bus. In case you are wondering and you don't know any of the specs on it, it is a 2003 Ford Excursion, limited, so it's got leather, as you can see. It is a 2003 7.3, very last year of the 7.3s, which is a good thing. When I bought it, it was from the original owner, and it was in Kentucky. Thank you, Ryan Stewart. Friend saw it, knew I was looking for an excursion, said, dude, you need this, so I got it. It had 117,000 miles on it, and it was bone stock. When I say bone stock, I mean fully bone stock. Stock intake, stock exhaust. I think the only thing the guy did was he Linexed the wheel wells. That was it. Stock wheels, stock tires, stock everything. I don't think the intake or any. I don't even think the intercooler boot's ever been off. Never. So, like any good son would do, I flew my dad out to Kentucky and had him drive it back after I bought it because I got work and he's retired. So, got it back here in its bone stock form, drove it for about 2 weeks, and then obviously it was time for horsepower. Not lots, just more than stock. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll kind of talk about what the end goal for the truck was and all that kind of good stuff. So from the get-go, we just jumped right into it, and we did some tuning. We did a GTP 38R with a billet wheel, diamond eye exhaust, has a Rotomaster, non-EBV outlet, and pedestal. And I think, and BD Bellowed Up-pipes, because if you're going to be back there doing it, you might as well get it done. So that was the first round of parts, and truck ran really well. You're probably wondering, why not S&B intake? Well, it didn't come in time, so I did all those parts, put an S&B intake on there. And for anybody ever wondering if you do actually need an S&B intake or just an intake on your truck with a 38R, if you're familiar with 7.3s, they have one of those air filter full little hum dealies on it. And after 2 hard pulls with the 38R, with a brand new high flow filter in it, because it's a high flow filter and a stock intake, it was already reading, I think, 85 or 90% full. So it was obviously not getting enough air. So then came the S&B cold air intake with the oiled reusable filter. That's how it sat for a long time while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do suspension-wise. I knew that I wanted to do Carli, but budget's always a factor. So for the meantime, because I needed tires, I actually did a zone 1-inch shackle lift in the front and was able to squeeze in some 35s on the methods that are on it now. There's the method grid in titanium 17 by 9s with like a 4.75 backspace. Obviously they rubbed, didn't care, 35s is life. And the exhaust with the muffler. So it sat like that for a long time. I tried to figure out what I was going to do. I knew whatever I was going to do, it needed to have full rear leafs, and I wanted full leafs at the front too, and some good shocks. So ended up just pulling the trigger on the Carli kit about a year. I put it on in the beginning of 17. Yeah, because wife was pregnant, so beginning of 17. I bought this in 16, BT dubs. So bought the Carli kit, and if you're not familiar with that, that has full Deavers front and rear, progressive rate springs with King 2.5 inch or 2.5 shocks with reservoirs, and then all the proper accoutrement to go along with it. So you have your track bar drop brackets, your sway bar end links, your valves, bump stop drops and relocation brackets, brake lines, all that kind of good stuff. Put that on, and if you've ever lifted an Excursion, you know that rear line drive vibration is a real thing. It seems like no matter what you do, you're going to get rear drive line vibration. And it's funny because everybody always, oh, you know, on a Super Duty, you can get away with, you know, just like a 4-inch lift and stock drive shaft, no big deal. No big deal, it's fine. So I went through and I was getting a driveline vibration, and I shimmed the rear, I rebuilt the drive shaft, I did everything. And finally just said, screw it. That's not it. I don't know what's going on. What the hell is that? Anyhow, so actually ended up doing a Tom Woods rear driveline Dual-Cardan in front, and the rear end is still actually shimmed. It got rid of that vibration pretty much all the way. It does still have a little bit of driveline vibration. It does need a proper. I never realigned the rear, so the pinion is not pointing at the transfer case like it's supposed to. But it doesn't vibrate that much, and it doesn't bother me. It's one of those things on the list of things I probably would eventually get done, but hasn't. What in the hell is rattling? Okay, found it. It's a seatbelt. Anyhow, rear driveline vibration, ended up doing a Tom Woods Dual-Cardan drive shaft in the rear. Never actually redid the pinion angle. So it does have a slight vibration, nothing too crazy. I'm okay with it. It'll eventually get taken care of, but it hasn't yet. Let's see. Carli lift, and shortly, so on the Carli lift I was actually still running the 35s for quite a while. And they actually didn't rub at all. So if you're curious on that setup, full compression did not rub, even with the 4 3/4 backspace wheels. I would recommend going more with like a 4.5, which is what I was thinking about putting on it. But they didn't rub, and they actually rode pretty nice. There was a bit of a wheel well gap, but we all know how that is. And so this gets it off-road. I was driving 4th of July with my 7.5 month pregnant wife, and we were doing some spirited driving, I guess you could say, down a dirt road. Actually kind of like a dirt area. There wasn't much of a road down to where we go 4th of July, and I managed to blow out both my front tires. So lesson be learned with your wife is, luckily my wife is a trooper, and we ended up walking the next 1.5 miles in 100+ degree weather to camp, so we could go meet up with our other folks there, and we could have some beers and then drive back and patch the tires and limp on into camp. Anyhow, at that point I put the 37s on there. Did not change the suspension one bit. Also, just so you know, there are 5 wheels and 5 tires. 1 wheel and 1 tire have never been mounted at all. So I do have a set of 5. Bought them new 37-inch Goodyear MTRs. And they do rub a little bit on the spring, but again, don't really care. They look better, they ride well, and I like them, and they look really good. So put the 37s on there, and next thing you're wondering is probably gearing. It still does have the stock gears in it. It's got 373s in it, and we'll touch on why I haven't done that yet either, because it was all part of the plan. So what else have we done there? There's also the diesel site coolant filtration system, along with their 203, oh yes, the 203 degree thermostat. If you live in a cold area or just have a 7.3 in general, you know they're relatively cold-blooded. So the 203 degree thermostat does raise the operating temperature just slightly, which allows it to, let's say you're sitting at a stoplight in the winter in Spokane, which gets pretty freaking cold, and you pretty much have no heat. That's no longer an issue with the 203 degree thermostat. And just 7.3s in general, you always look at them and they're basically operating temperature, unless you're pulling a grade or something like that, is basically just right above cold. This actually gets to the proper operating temperature, which is nice, because that's how you use other things on the truck. So I have the coolant filtration system from Diesel Site, the dual alternator hose that goes outside of the serpentine belt, and the billet thermostat housing, along with 203 degree thermostat. Other things on there before we get into transmission hell. Let's see here. That's all I can think of. Next, transmission. So obviously with 373s and 37s and making a little bit more power, you start to test limits of parts on the truck. Transmissions. I was able to slip the converter like all the way through second. And when I say slip, but like it was not cool. It was just revving out, not going anywhere. So I knew something had to change. So I accrued some parts, and the transmission at that point still had relatively low miles on it. I think it only had 129 at that point, 130. So I was thinking I'll just do kind of the basics to get it running better before we get a big badass transmission in there. So pulled the transmission, did a BD enhanced stall converter with a BD accumulator and deep sump pan and external filter. For the accumulator, we elected to go with a firmer shift from 1 to 2, a firmer shift from 2 to 3, and a standard shift from 3 to 4. And then obviously it was all replaced with Schaefer's fluids, because Schaefer's is the best. Went to do that, and I broke my rule, which is working on transmissions. You've probably heard that. So it had to get pulled out a total of 4 times, and at the end of it, I basically just took it to our transmission guy locally here, and I was like, hey man, so I did what I shouldn't have done. Can I drop my transmission off with you and you can get it done, and just, you know, basically just tell me how much it costs in the end. I only want to build it once, make magic. And at this point, my wife was still, I think she was about 8 months pregnant, maybe 8.5. And then to make things even more fun, I was like, hey, so I need to get that done. I'm gonna drop it off on Monday, and I gotta drive to California on Wednesday for a baby shower. So yeah, I'm that kind of guy. Anyhow, our transmission guy is badass. He got it done, and so I brought it to him, and he opened it up, and he's like, did you mess around with the accumulators, or the spring, the shift spring from 1 to 2? I was like, maybe, because I did what I shouldn't have, and that's basically why I thought I lost second gear. And so he had it in his hands, and he was like, you know, I know you're getting ready to have a baby. The clutches and steels in here, everything is pristine. It looks great. The fluid is perfect. So if you're not planning to do huge horsepower right now, I would say save the money, do the full transmission later on when you got a little bit more stacked up. Lesson be learned, a good transmission guy is worth his weight in gold several times over. Like a good tattoo artist, a good pediatrician, good mechanic. Transmission guys are few and far between that are loyal and truthful. So thank God, I don't say that very often, but went and picked it up from him. Wife was very happy about that one, and threw the transmission back in the truck, and it was good to go. You know, it runs really well now. It holds the power. You can actually fully, rev it out all the way through and all the way up to redline, and actually pulls and shifts well. There's definitely a sweet spot if you don't know what you're doing, or you've never driven a transmission that has some extra parts in there. You realize that there's definitely a sweet spot. If you're not careful what you're doing, it'll bang into gear, which I don't mind. I know how to drive it, and whoever buys this will figure it out very quickly. So that holds the power. I only had to pull it 4 times to figure that one out. Go me. So that means the transfer case also does have Schaefer's fluids in it. Moving on from there, man, what's next? Obviously the Edge Insight CTS2, duh. I think that covers that portion. Next part, what was the plan? So the plan was, I basically wanted to see how much power I could squeeze out of this thing with a stock high pressure oil pump and stock injectors. This thing was definitely going to be go through phases, so that's what I wanted to do. I still need to get a dyno because I'm basically at the end of that phase, but on paper, hopefully it should be living right about that 400 mark. Why 400? Because if you know anything about 7.3s, the later model ones, they have powdered metal rods, and they tend to go by about 425, 450. So that's why I, spec'd out a sheet to do this for basically to live at 400, and so far it does pretty well with that. So the plan was to basically get it where it is now, which is about 140,000 miles on it, with a stock injector still in good shape, high pressure oil pump still in good shape, and now was the time to start saving. What are we saving for? Well, I was wanting to do like a 6.7 front end, so like the newer 11 to 16 Powerstrokes, 6.7 front end, and then at that point get the whole thing painted. As we look over the vehicle, you're probably going to notice that the paint is starting to peel and fade. That doesn't really bother me. I build things from the inside out, and I was planning on getting the whole thing repainted when I did the front end, which is I'm not going to do anymore because I'm selling it. So that's why the exterior of the truck or the exterior of the Excursion had never been addressed. I mean, aside from the wrap, I mean, it still has the stock mirrors on it. The bumper, it's had those dents in it since I bought it, and it would have stayed like that until I did the 16 front end. At that time, during the 16 front end, we were also gonna, go through and basically get rid of any of the corrosion on the frame. This thing is from Kentucky. It's got some surface rust on the frame. That's life. But we're gonna go through and redo all of that, make it all super nice and pretty. There are some rust spots on the bottom of the corners. I'll show those in the video. They're not bad by any means, but they would be fixed and easily fixed during that time. So the bodywork was the next in line. After the bodywork would be basically the rest of the performance modifications. And what I mean by that is basically doing a long block. Getting a long block and making sure the rods will be able to hold everything, with a goal being I wanted a very punchy 550. I'm not asking for the world. I wanted to maybe dyno at 650, but daily drive, I wanted to be able to punch this thing in the face with 550 and just let it ride. And obviously doing gears and whatnot, and probably I was thinking about doing an 11 to 16 rear axle because it has an electronic locker, and you can get those with factory 410s, and those are essentially a drop-in. And so then I would just have to change the axle or the gears in the front. So that was the plan, and then probably at that time either do an SXE setup on the truck, like a 364.5, and maybe some 205 injectors. Nothing too crazy. I just wanted it to be a very, very, very punchy, all the power right now, still be able to tow and clean. I like things to be clean. I don't like rolling coal. I don't like putting a bunch of black smoke out. I just want it to be clean and fast, and that was the goal. So, that all being said, interior-wise, this thing is pretty much stock. I take care of my vehicles. It's got WeatherTech floor mats all the way around. I clean them regularly. Still has the stock stereo with a tape player, and that is an adapter so I can listen to it on my phone. And actually, the stock stereo gets down pretty well. I was actually pretty surprised. Another reason why I haven't changed it. Otherwise, I mean, it's a great running rig. Why am I selling, basically? I'm selling because I need to buy a house. Housing market is crazy pretty much anywhere right now, especially in Spokane. Things are blowing up, so I need to buy a house. And why is everybody... Oh, yeah, you got a green light, bud. Housing market is crazy, especially in Spokane. And anybody who went to school, if you have student loans, you know that you got to get pretty much everything off your name to be able to buy a house with student loans. That's just life. Not complaining, but that's the situation. So I still owe money on this thing, so I need to get rid of it. Never wanted to, never planned on it, but that's life. Got to adult sometimes, and whatever. What am I looking to get into? Needs to have air conditioning because it gets hot up here and I have a baby. Also need to be able to put a car seat in and out of the rear seat very easily. That's why I'm usually looking, or pretty much looking for, maybe like a 4-door Tacoma with a 3.4 in it, or a later model one with a 4.0. I'm not opposed to that. Or 4Runner, no 3.0s. Basically something like that, and I'll probably just end up doing some Icon suspension, maybe some camber, I'm not sure yet. Basically just make that so I can just beat on it and not have a payment, and do that for about 2 years, which isn't my favorite thing to do because I'm a Ford guy, but that's life, no big deal. Why did I pick $30,000? $30,000 is a starting point. There are a lot of parts and time into this truck. I keep saying truck and it's Excursion, but you know what I mean. So yeah, $30,000 is the start here. Sure, are you going to find cheaper ones out there? Absolutely. Are you going to find cheaper ones out there that have a decent amount of stuff done to them? Yes. Are you going to find cheaper ones out there that have this amount of miles with this amount of stuff done to it with this high of, you know, I would say is everything on here is a pretty high caliber part? I don't think so. You know, I know that these things blue book for like 12 or 14 right in there, and I also know that none of them are selling for blue book because they're hard to find. So, you know, that's kind of like my sales pitch right there. It's a little bit of everything. So, yeah, I'm gonna try and clip in some other stuff there. My editing skills are pretty crappy, so that's about it. Hopefully you like what you see. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. It's got a fast 125 on it. Fast 125 with a 75 PSI spring on there. This thing starts great in the cold. That too, yeah. So in Spokane, if you're not familiar with the area, it gets very cold here. In the winter, actually I wouldn't say very cold, colder than most. In the winter, you know, it's not common to be below, 15 for weeks at a time. At night, it definitely gets below 0 very quickly, and it won't, there'll probably be a month in there where it won't get over 20 degrees during the day. So at least do some very cold starts. If you follow my Instagram, you know I'm kind of a whore when it comes to cold start videos. I've never had an opportunity to plug this thing in. When I bought it, the first apartment I lived on the 3rd floor, and there was nowhere to plug it in. All my videos, you probably saw the plug hanging out. Well, the apartment I live in now, I set up all the cables and everything and ran extension cord through my garage to be able to do it. The first night I plugged it in, it popped the fuse. So I was never able to actually plug it in. So for 2 winters, it started every time, no matter how cold it was, no matter how long it sat. So it definitely doesn't have any issues cold starting like some 7.3s do. I would, also this thing gets down in the snow. Fucking honey badger mode. Said an F word. Freaking honey badger mode. And it sounds really good. 38R definitely gets down. It's preset at 40 PSI. I doubt that we're actually getting close there, maybe in the mid-30s. The stock map sensor only goes to 25, so all I know is I can hit 25 really fast. I don't know what happens after that. It does have the Aeroturbine 4040 XL on there now, which I get it. I get why Aeroturbines are so sought after. This thing is a very unique sounding truck. Excursion. God. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Please ask me any questions you have. I am not 1000% firm on 30. However, the faster you make me offers, the faster I'm going to sell this thing. I really don't want to have to post it. I'd rather sell it to somebody I know. Or somebody like a friend of a friend or something like that. I don't want to deal with Craigslist crap. So there's also referral. If you refer it to someone and they buy it, I'll kick a couple $100 their way or something like that. I would like to see it go to a good home. I know I'm losing on this thing, but that's life. So if you have any questions, I guess the best way to get a hold of me is probably email, which I'll put down below. You can DM me on Instagram. That's also a really good way to do it. SpoolBusBen, if you didn't know that, it's SpoolBusBen, same as the YouTube channel, SpoolBusBen, which eventually will, I guess, be changing soon because I won't have a freaking spool bus anymore. Also, we can negotiate General Mattis. He can come with it if you like. If that's your thing. Anyhow, thanks for watching. I hope someone really cool buys this thing because it's freaking awesome. God, I don't want to sell it.